We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Graham J. Noble. Earlier in the show, we were talking the potential of a debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But now I want to dig a bit more into the weeds of 2024, the election, how things are looking at the moment. And Graham, so the recent polling has, from Gallup, I believe, has Joe Biden is at a 70-year low in presidential approvals, which, as we spoke about earlier before the recording, Joe Biden was probably around when, and reading those polls when that first one came out. How does he recover from
I think that was about the time he was starting the civil rights movement.
Yes, when he started the civil rights movement, just after his uncle was eaten by cannibals in Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
So how does somebody turn around a 70-year low in 6 months?
It's very easy. You do your own polls where you just heavily massage the numbers, and all of a sudden that 70-year low becomes a 70-year high or something. I don't know. It's just not possible to turn it around. I don't know. Was the poll an outlier? Perhaps. I think there's a kind of an argument that possibly it is, but then again, Joe Biden has been consistently polling very badly over the last year and a half. So how much of an outlier that poll is, if indeed it was at all, is hard to say. But can he turn his numbers, his approval figures around? Before the election? I can't imagine that happening, to be honest.
Well, there's something interesting there. I disagree with you, which is rare. I'm usually very much simpatico with your political analysis. I think he could turn it around. And here's my Joe Biden, if you're listening, here's your roadmap to success coming down. Please do give me credit in the footnotes of history. First, shut the border down, right? Say that we fixed all of these problems that Donald Trump made at the border, and now we can finally fix it. And look, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all the illegal aliens that came across the border, and we're going to process them in Mexico, and only those with legitimate asylum claims are going to set foot on U.S. soil. And then we're not going to pay off the student loans. We've done enough of that. Now we're going to do a low-tax environment, and essentially, if he turned around and became Donald Trump, I think that he could win by a landslide, in fact. A landslide that I don't believe Donald Trump is in a position to get, because there's still so many people who are so virulently anti-Trump. But if Joe Biden flipped it on policies, he might lose some of the more progressive in his party. But there's a whole swath of Democrats who are not far left progressives. I think that's about right. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it's a brilliant idea on paper. I don't see it happening, but yeah, true. I mean, the irony is that Joe Biden actually could beat Donald Trump by, as you say, becoming Donald Trump. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of Democrats that still are holding on to some rationality and common sense and have more moderate views. And they wouldn't at all be upset if Biden kind of shifted, I guess, towards the center, or maybe, if you like, towards the right. But the problem is, he seems to be terrified of the progressive movement, and he seems to be reluctant to do anything that would be sensible and good for the country if it's going to anger the progressives. And that I don't quite understand. Because he's literally playing to the fringe. He's playing to the extreme left, to the detriment of all the rest of us, including all of his more moderate supporters.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the very fact that we call them the fringe, it's not just a cruel name. It's fringe. It's a tiny minority.
Yeah.
Speaking of that particular tiny minority, how do you think that the recent campus protests, especially the ones at Columbia University, how do you think those are going to play out politically for Joe Biden and Donald Trump?
Well, and in fact, I'm writing about that today, and I think the point I'm making is that this is okay. The rabid anti-Semitism that is on display, I think, is a serious issue, and I don't think we should sideline that.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, the underlying agenda of these protesters, demonstrators, rioters, whatever you want to call them, the mob, is the same agenda as they had in the summer of 2020 when they were burning American cities. These are the same people, or at least they're working off of exactly the same, kind of Marxist game plan, which is smash the system, so that we can rebuild it in the image of our Marxist utopia.
Yeah, the dream of that communist utopia. Always just. Do you think these kind of protests will continue up to the election, the 2024 election? Or, and let's be clear, there's always an element in these kind of movements that are political, right? They kind of appear around election times, and a lot of funding for these movements comes from the same sources. And so they tend to appear around election time, but I can't see how this particular movement benefits the left, which the other movements often have.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of funny because during the summer of 2020 there, we were looking at there was an election on the horizon, and the and I'm sure that a lot of elected Democrats, whether they would admit it publicly or not, and some of them actually did, were very pleased about the chaos and the violence and all the rest of it, because they could say, look, we've got an incumbent president here who's running for a second term, and there's just chaos in the streets. But now the chaos is kind of detrimental to the Biden administration, particularly because he's never actually full-throatedly condemned them. He's kind of half-heartedly condemned them, but then he had his kind of the like Trump's Charlottesville moment where he said, I condemn the protesters, but I also condemn the people who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians, which was, crazy.
Yeah, Tim Donner, Liberty Nation senior political analyst, actually wrote that exact thing. And it was Joe Biden's very fine people on both sides moment.
Right. Yeah.
And I think he was absolutely right in his analysis. And I think that's going to come back and haunt him, because these people are not the most rational people, and you don't want them on your side regardless. Graham J. Noble, thanks ever so much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Mark.
We dismiss history at our peril. Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.